Well, good morning, everybody. We're here from the People to the Pulpit, where we're getting questions to engage the sermon, to ask questions about that. We got to get good responses, and so we got Dr. Juan here for us.
Good morning, everybody.
Our music director, and he's pitch hitting for Pastor Stewart. He's with a family, the columbarium over there, and turning a loved one. And so filling in for Pastor Stewart, and got
Wonderful.
some questions for
Well,
you
again,
today.
thanks for the good word this morning, Pastor. Enjoying this series very much. I love that question that you start with every week. How is your soul? I think in this day and age, very few people just take time to tend to their souls. And to me, I always think of, what is the greatest commandment? To love thy God as yourself. And I think oftentimes people miss the as yourself part. That implies taking care of yourself and paying attention. And so one question would be, a lot of people go through life thinking, actually, things in my soul are good. And a question that would come is, well, how do we know? Think, for instance, somebody who feels great all the time, and one day they go to the doctor and they tell them, you have stage 4 cancer. And they never knew. And they always felt good. And then once they know that, they look back, it's like, oh yeah, I remember feeling this or thinking that, and then it makes sense. And in the same way, in our soul, sometimes we think everything is good in our soul, but how do we really know?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's kind of a mysterious thing. Like, how do you
close the service with that idea of mystery, precisely.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that I was saying, like, a peace that passes all understanding. I also, if you live a minute, you know that everything doesn't go the way that you would like it to. And so I think your soul is good when things aren't going well and you're still at peace. When you might get diagnoses or things like that, and it might really rock your world, but yet there's a groundedness. And I think that's more of like what I'm kind of talking about, is a groundedness, and it's and it takes in the wholeness of us as a human being. We want to compartmentalize different parts of us: the physical part, the mental part, and the emotional part, and then the spiritual part. And the biblical concept is looking at humanity as a psychosomatic whole. And so I think when things are right with your soul, it's also right with all of that. Your physical life is good, but like you said, with cancer, there are things that can happen, and we might not have that physical wholeness, but if we're taking care of our bodies, we have that. The emotional health, that's one of the things that's a big hot topic, and we've realized just how much we need emotional care and how much we need to work on our emotions. COVID really exposed that. And the mental, we've got to stay engaged mentally. And I think when you are focused, when you are working those things, and then your soul, which is your spirit, praying for God's will to be done. I mean, just the simple Lord's Prayer, your will, nothing more, nothing less. That's what I want. Like, getting to that place in your faith and then combining all of that, I think that's when your soul is. And, I think you could, an example of this is that song, the hymn, It Is Well With My Soul. We sang that at the 8 a.m. service.
One of my favorites.
The context is that the man who wrote that had lost his wife and daughters. And he wrote that beautiful song, It Is Well With My Soul. His life was literally turned upside down. I'm sure he ached physically. I'm sure his emotions were rocked, and all of that, but yet that faith and taking care of all of that, he was able to still stay grounded and have a certain peace in the midst of that chaos. And I think that's how we know our soul is good.
I think that's interesting. We had this, yet again, a terrible tragedy in a school where some young children lost their lives. And And some people, parents even of this, that have experienced this sort of tragedy, express their faith through saying, while this is a terrible tragedy, we are in full confidence that God's still in control, that he takes care of us, even in the midst of the worst that humanity can produce, can do, right? And so this kind of brings me to, you made a reference between bad influences and good influences that we all have. And the question really would be for most of us, as we sit in a pew week after week, what are some of these faith things that we can begin to exercise to become these good influences in those around us, in our family, in our parents, in our neighbor, in our community as we experience tragedies like this?
That's a really good thing. One of the things that I see, that we see all across the board during tragedies, is coming together. And there is that coming together. I also think in coming together, acknowledging the human loss. That's one of the things that we sometimes, I guess, stray from in faith, that we just want to talk about all the good things, the blessings, and when God acted and answered prayers. Well, God is still very active, even though this tragedy happened. And so there is this acknowledgement of how wrong and how bad, but yet there is this hope. And I see all the time candles and flowers, and all of these are little signs, little symbols, little practices that really help us, to bring us comfort during those times. So I think those good influences that help us during those tragedies is coming together, just loving, supporting, and saying how awful this is. And basically, my heart is hurting with you. And just hurting with somebody, walking with them. It's like the empathy that we exercise with people. And I think, if anything, you made a reference to the right way and the wrong way. Oftentimes, simply being there with somebody, not saying anything, but just standing with them, it becomes the right way. Oftentimes, we don't have to say much. I'm reminded of the story of Job. When the three friends came and they just sat with them.
Sometimes
that was
that's
great.
What we can do, and it was great. And oftentimes,
when they started messing up, they opened their mouths.
That's right. And I think we all can say amen to that. Lord, I tell my children, one of my favorite verses in the Bible is, even the fool is wise when he knows when to shut up, when to be quiet, right? There's great wisdom in that. So as we go, into this walk faith, this process, the way we've always done it, perhaps there is something to be said about moving away from format and moving into an area of substance to pursue depth in our faith, which is different than a series of steps. And to me, there's no greater deconstructionist of faith, as you mentioned towards the end, than Jesus himself. In the Sermon on the Mount, he begins by saying, you've heard it said, like we've always done it this way, but now I tell you. You've heard it said, but now I'm telling you. And completely deconstructed the fate of the day. Like the law was done away with into a series of principles that becomes the new faith, the New Testament, the message of hope. It's not about what you have to do. It's really about the way you live. And so I appreciated this series of sermons on that, the essentials of the faith that basically Jesus teaches. So as we go into our daily life, what are some of the more practical essentials of the faith that we can exercise to begin with, the little milk that can become the solid food?
I think prayer is one. And depending on where you are in your faith, like the Lord's Prayer, we did the sermon series on the Lord's Prayer, and the Lord's Prayer challenge I always give out. They pray the Lord's Prayer 3 times a day. That really helps you. That recenters you. And when you do that, when you pray, like take this example, 3 times a day. You think about your morning, if your routine, like I preached on, it didn't go right or something happens, you look on the app like, man, there's a lot of traffic. I got to go through town or whatever, you know. By saying the prayer, it helps you kind of ground yourself with whatever's happening at the start of your day. By lunch, how many times by lunch you're like ready to go home and like things have gone crazy, right?
Sure.
At lunch, you say the Lord's Prayer, helps you reframe. And then at dinner time or right before you go to bed, saying it again, just helps you to look back on your day and put it into perspective by praying. So I think prayer is one, whether you're saying prayers or just meditating. That's one of the things I've been doing a lot is meditating and prayer, just breathing. And I do this binaural beats, beta waves, because I deal with anxiety. And the professionals talk about how those wavelengths really do help your brain and your brain chemistry, and it does. It does. It really works. I really do think that. But when I do that and I'm deep breathing and just that, and then I'll pray the Lord's Prayer in English and in Greek, and then I pray the Serenity Prayer. And just that meditation, when I do that, my days I find myself when I want to be anxious or stressed, I find myself taking a deep breath and start going to the Lord's Prayer or the Serenity Prayer. So that really helps. Seeing other people. We live in a day and time where we can be very glued to phones, glued to the cliques that we're in because they think like us and act like us. But looking at people, seeing people, and listening to people, I found that is also really helps us in our faith. Because that's kind of the service part there, to really care for somebody, to listen. And I think in today's busyness, to just stop and listen is really service to people. And so serving others, engaging with others, that is another thing to really help ground you and really help your soul development. Absolutely. And then, just study and reading the Bible, just, no matter how much I read and how much I study, I'll read a particular passage and it speaks to me in a little different way, than it might have before. And so just continuing that knowledge. And then letting people, inviting people who are further along in their faith into my life, spiritual accountability or counselors or thing, to really help me, motivate me, and push me to grow. And so I think those are the things that you could do. Maybe not on a daily basis, but like the accountability part. But there's other things you can definitely do on a daily basis. So.
Absolutely. I do music, of course, and I tell my students, one of the things that I love music is that music is so much like my faith. In music, there's really never a point where you can say, I got it, it's done. And in faith, it's exactly the same. You can never say, God, I got him, bring on quantum physics. There's always our whole life can be spent and it'll never be exhausted. And I think that's a wonderful reminder, that this is what God calls us to do, to pursue him throughout our entire lives. And at some point, we just kind of need to make the decision to do that, which is part of what you're calling us to in this series. And I really appreciate that. So thank you so much, Pastor.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. And please give us your questions and responses. We'd love to engage with you. But until then, we thank you for tuning in. And may God bless you and keep you. And may we all grow in our faith and knowledge of God. So have a great day. Bye.